It had been close to 8 months since I'd last laid eyes on Daniel. He'd come back to the city after completing his doctoral studies. And his mother, my younger sister Claire, kept nudging me to visit. "He asks about you," she mentioned during one of our evening calls. "He's changed, Grace, you won't recognize him." So that Sunday morning, I prepared my grandmother's apple bread and drove across the bridge to his new place. Spring had just begun to stir, the first blossoms dotting the trees, that gentle warmth before summer truly arrives. It was one of those soft mornings when the light feels like a forgotten song. Daniel's apartment was modest but well kept. Bookshelves covered nearly every wall, and the faint aroma of sandalwood and fresh tea hung in the air. He welcomed me with that familiar lopsided smile he'd worn since childhood, only now something else rested behind it. Maturity, perhaps, or maybe guardedness. "Aunt Grace," he said, wrapping me in an embrace that lasted, just a moment longer than I anticipated. "You look wonderful," I waved him off. "You only say that when you're buttering me up. Or maybe I simply mean it." He grinned, and I noticed suddenly how much he resembled his late father. The same hazel blue eyes, the same measured stance, as though he were holding back a secret. We settled into chairs, and I served the herbal tea I'd brought from the little shop on Cedar Lane. We spoke about his career, my volunteer work, his new position at the Research Institute. It felt natural, until it didn't. Somewhere between the comfortable silences and shared laughter, I sensed him observing me. Not in any unsettling way, but with a gentle inquisitiveness that caught me off guard. "Do you ever notice how life sneaks past you?" he asked abruptly, his tone dropping. "One moment you're a child climbing trees in someone's garden, and suddenly you're the one brewing tea and dispensing wisdom." I offered a faint smile. "That's the way of things. One heartbeat and you're standing on the other side." He agreed quietly. Then, without preamble, he leaned slightly forward. "Have you ever wished you'd had children of your own?" The question struck deeper than I expected. For a breath, I couldn't respond. It wasn't unkind, it was sincere, but it was also intimate, and hearing it from him, well, it startled me. "I used to," I finally answered. "Occasionally I still do. But fate had different intentions, and besides, I've had plenty of souls to nurture. Your mother. You." I paused, watching his expression gentle. He remained silent at first. Then he reached for my hand, carefully, as if apologizing for stirring old waters. His palm was warm, his thumb brushing my knuckles before he withdrew. "Forgive me," he murmured. "I didn't intend to make things heavy, Sometimes I marvel at how you seem to understand people so completely, like you can see straight through them." I chuckled softly, attempting to lighten the mood. "That's simply what happens when you've lived long enough. People stop being mysteries." But even as I spoke, I knew it wasn't accurate. Because right then, sitting across from my grown nephew in the gentle afternoon glow, I felt something awaken that had been dormant for years. A strange awareness of connection. Not romantic, not forbidden, just profoundly human. Two souls encountering each other honestly, without the veils of age or family expectations. The teapot whistled faintly from the kitchen. I rose to pour fresh cups, my hands trembling just slightly. When I turned back, Daniel was still watching me with that same contemplative look, quiet and impossible to read. And for the first time, I wondered what other questions he might pose before the day ended. The remainder of that afternoon unfolded gradually, the kind of day where every sound seems amplified. Every glance extends a heartbeat too long. The rain arrived shortly after I'd refilled our cups. It began gently, a murmur against the glass, then steadied, dissolving the world outside into a silver haze. Daniel moved to the sofa, motioning for me to join him. He'd always been so transparent, even as a boy, but now there was something almost intentional in the way he welcomed me into his space. I convinced myself it was merely closeness, family warmth. Still, when I sat down, I felt his knee brush against mine, and I became suddenly conscious of the gap between us, or rather, how narrow it had become. "You know," he said after a silence, "I used to believe adults had everything sorted, like you all possess some secret manual." I smiled faintly, gazing at my cup. "That's the great illusion of growing up, we don't. We just become skilled at pretending." He laughed softly. "Then you're quite the performer." "Perhaps too skilled," I confessed, meeting his eyes. "Sometimes I think I've spent half my existence pretending I wasn't alone. The admission escaped before I could catch it. I wasn't certain why I'd said it. Maybe the rain had made everything feel more vulnerable. Maybe it felt safe to voice what I'd always kept silent. Daniel didn't recoil. He looked at me as though listening for something beneath the surface. "Is that why you stopped looking for someone?" he asked gently. I released a slow breath, letting out a hollow laugh. Eventually, it just didn't seem worthwhile. I grew accustomed to my own company. He leaned back, nodding, his gaze never leaving mine. "You deserve more than just accustomed." The words lingered in the air, tender yet weighty. I felt a pang of something unnamed. Not discomfort, not longing, just the ache of being truly perceived. We shifted topics after that, or attempted to. He shared stories from his new work, about students who reminded him of his younger self, brimming with questions and certainty. I listened, half smiling, but part of me wandered elsewhere. His voice had deepened since I'd last heard it regularly, measured and calm. Each time he laughed, I myself recalling the small boy who used to chase butterflies through my backyard. Now he sat beside me, a man with the same spark in his eyes, but something wiser, quieter beneath it. As the hours slipped by, the light began to fade, the room filled with the amber glow of a solitary lamp. I noticed the rain had stopped, replaced by the distant hum of evening traffic. Daniel stood and stretched, then glanced at me. "Would you like to stay for supper?" I was planning something simple. I hesitated. I should have declined. But truthfully, I didn't want the moment to dissolve. "All right," I said softly. "What are we preparing?" He grinned. "Whatever you're willing to teach me. I'm still hopeless in the kitchen." We ended up standing shoulder to shoulder at the counter, slicing vegetables, laughing at his awkward attempts to dice onions without tearing up. The scent of rosemary and butter filled the air, wrapping us in something cozy and familiar. Occasionally our arms touched, and I'd sense that same small jolt of awareness, not improper, not confusing, just genuine. The kind of closeness that emerges when two people trust each other completely. When we finally sat down to eat, a comfortable stillness settled between us. I looked across the table and realized how deeply I'd missed this. Conversation, presence, the simple gift of being noticed and heard. "Thank you for coming today," he said quietly as we finished. "I didn't realize how much I needed it." "Neither did I replied, meaning it more than I could express. After supper, he walked me to my car. The pavement remained damp, mirroring the streetlights in small golden pools. I turned to embrace him goodbye, and he held me, steady, firm, warm. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of embrace that lingers because neither person wishes to release first. When he finally stepped back, he regarded me with a small, thoughtful smile. "May I ask you something else next time you visit?" I smiled in return. "That depends on the question." He laughed quietly. "Fair enough." As I drove home, the image of his face in that dim light remained with me. Nothing improper had occurred, just an unexpected tenderness, a moment of emotional truth I hadn't foreseen. Yet, as I pulled into my driveway, I couldn't help pondering, whatever he planned to ask next time, it would alter something. The week following my visit with Daniel, I found myself revisiting that afternoon more than anticipated. The question he'd asked, the one about regret, kept resurfacing, not as an anxiety, but as a quiet echo I couldn't dismiss. I recognized I hadn't examined those emotions so openly in years. And somehow, speaking with him had awakened something dormant within me, a blend of yearning, introspection, and hope. When Saturday arrived again, I found myself organizing my home almost obsessively. The apple bread was ready, wrapped in waxed cloth like before, and I filled a thermos with tea. I told myself I was being thorough because I wanted to present myself well, but beneath that I understood it was more. I craved the comfort of routine, the warmth and familiarity, but also the quiet bond that had lingered in my thoughts long after I'd departed. Daniel opened the door before I could knock. He wore that same crooked grin, but something lighter shone in his eyes, like he'd been anticipating me just as I'd been anticipating him. "Grace," he said, and this time the embrace lasted a breath longer than usual. I felt his warmth close, the subtle scent of sandalwood still clinging to his sweater. Come in. I've already started the kettle." We settled into the living room again, the same gentle light filtering through the curtains. Outside, the sky was powder blue, the kind that promises tranquil weather. But there was a certain tension in the air, a subtle current neither of us acknowledged directly. "I've been reflecting," he began after a while, his voice softer than usual, "about what I asked last time, about regret and the choices we make." I felt my chest tighten slightly. "Yes?" I asked, keeping my tone measured. He paused, then continued. "It made me curious about you, about what you felt, about the things you've wanted but never received." I gazed down at my hands, feeling the warmth of the cup against my palms. "I've wanted many things," I admitted quietly. "Some I've obtained, others I haven't. But I don't believe life is merely about what we've missed. It's also about the people we cherish and the moments we hold." He nodded slowly. "Exactly." His eyes met mine, steady and unwavering. "And that's why I'm asking now, because I feel we can discuss anything, and I want to understand more about you, about us." There it was, the weight behind his words, not a confession, not a demand, just honesty laid bare. I felt an unfamiliar thrill, a mixture of caution and faith. I understood then that the bond between us had evolved beyond casual visits or family obligation. It was something deeper, fragile and authentic. For hours we conversed, not merely about our histories, but about our emotions, our anxieties, the quiet corners we'd each inhabited for years. Every revelation, every laugh, every pause seemed to draw us nearer, dissolving the barriers time and distance had constructed. I found myself leaning forward naturally, feeling protected and witnessed in a way I hadn't predicted. By evening, the room was bathed in the soft radiance of a single lamp, casting shadows that swayed along the walls. We lingered in the living room, reluctant to end the moment, unwilling to abandon the intimacy we'd built. He reached over, gently touching my hand again. The contact was light, brief, yet it carried the gravity of unspoken comprehension. "I didn't expect this," he said quietly, almost to himself. "Not from anyone, but certainly not from you." "Neither did I acknowledged, "and yet here we are." There was a pause filled with quiet, reverence for the connection we'd uncovered. No pressure, no expectations, just two people encountering each other fully, without disguise. It was among the most vulnerable, surprising, and beautiful experiences of my existence. As I departed his apartment that evening, the world seemed altered, warmer, more expansive, brimming with possibility. I understood that life didn't always deliver what we expected, but occasionally the surprises were precisely what we needed to evolve, to rediscover ourselves, and to appreciate the depth of human connection. And within my heart, I knew this was merely the beginning. The days after that second visit drifted by in a haze of contemplation. I found myself recollecting every detail, the way Daniel's eyes softened when he laughed, the gentle brush of his hand, the honest silence that had filled the room like morning light through glass. I kept questioning what it all signified, not with judgment, but with the quiet wonder of someone discovering something profoundly human about themselves, and about him. When I arrived at his apartment the following weekend, there was an anticipation neither of us attempted to conceal. The weather had shifted once more. A cool breeze whispered through the branches outside, carrying the fragrance of damp soil and fresh blossoms. The neighborhood felt hushed, almost intimate, as though it too honored the significance of the moment. Daniel welcomed me with that same familiar warmth, but this time, there was an unspoken recognition in his smile. We sat together in the living room, the gentle murmur of the radiator punctuating our silence. I realized that words weren't always essential. Sometimes merely being present with someone, allowing them to occupy the same space without pretense, could communicate everything that mattered. "I've been thinking about us," he said eventually, his voice low and deliberate. Not in a romantic sense, not in a way that complicates things, but in a way that feels significant. Like we've discovered something genuine, something uncommon. I nodded slowly, comprehending exactly what he meant. "Yes," I said gently. "It's as though we've found a place where we can be entirely honest without apprehension, and that's invaluable." The conversation flowed naturally, touching on our pasts, our sorrows, our aspirations. Every disclosure seemed to strengthen the bond between us. Yet there was a mutual regard underlying it all. We weren't crossing lines carelessly. We were exploring emotions that had long lain dormant, entrusting each other with our vulnerabilities. Later, we moved to the kitchen to prepare a simple meal together. The familiar rhythm of chopping herbs, stirring pots, and sampling flavors filled the apartment with comfort. As we worked side by side, our hands occasionally met, But now there was no uncertainty in the gesture, only a quiet acknowledgement of closeness and silent understanding.